very soon we will all see the building of the third temple in Jerusalem.
After years of waiting, a perfect red heifer has finally been selected. A perfect heifer without a single blemish.
Something happened in the hills of Israel that the mainstream news completely ignored. A priest, a fire, an ancient ceremony, performed for the first time in over 2,000 years. And the animal at the center of it all, it just got approved. What happens next could change everything you think you know about where history is headed. The last time this ceremony was performed on Israeli soil, the Roman Empire was still standing. Caesar was on the throne. The apostles were still alive. Jerusalem still had a temple. That was 70 AD, and then it all stopped. For 1,956 years, a specific chain of events required to rebuild the Jewish temple has been broken. Missing pieces, impossible requirements, dead ends at every turn. But something has shifted, not slowly, not quietly, fast, and in plain.
Before we continue, don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more awe-inspiring stories of faith, survival, and miracles.
Now, in Jerusalem, there are over 60 sacred temple vessels sitting behind glass, not as museum displays, not as historical replicas, ready for use. Right now, priestly garments are hanging in storage, woven from materials that were lost to human knowledge for 1,500 years and only recently recovered from the floor of the Mediterranean Sea. Right now, more than 300 men with DNA-verified bloodlines are actively training for temple service, practicing rituals that have not been performed in 2 millennia. And right now, a red heifer, the single most impossible requirement in the entire process, has been approved. That is not speculation. That is not theology. That is what is happening on the ground in Israel today. There are 10 preparations required before the third temple can function. 9 are already complete. The 10th just moved closer than at any point in the last 2,000 years. And what that means for the prophecy in Daniel 9, the one Jesus himself told his disciples to watch for, is what this entire video is about. Because the pieces are not just lining up, they are locking into place. Of all 10 preparations, this one is different. Every other preparation can be accomplished through human effort. You can hire craftsmen to build vessels. You can train weavers to create garments. You can collect stones and teach priests their duties. Human skill can produce all of those. But no amount of human skill, no amount of money, no level of technology can produce a red heifer. It has to be born, naturally, without intervention, without breeding programs designed to force the outcome. And the requirements are so specific that in over 1,000 years of temple history, spanning both Solomon's temple and Herod's temple, Jewish tradition records that only 9 red heifers were ever found and accepted. 9 in 1,000 years, and 0 in the 1,956 years since. So what exactly makes a red heifer so rare? Numbers 19 lays it out with a precision that leaves no room for interpretation. The animal must be entirely red. Not mostly red, not predominantly red. Every single hair on its body must be red. 1 black hair, 1 white hair, disqualified. A physical blemish of any kind, disqualified. A yoke ever placed on its neck for any purpose, disqualified. And it must be at least 3 years old, which means it has to survive that long without developing a single disqualifying mark. The window for a qualifying animal is extraordinarily narrow. But here is what makes the red heifer more than just a rare animal. The ashes of the red heifer, mixed with water, create what the Bible calls the waters of purification. It is the only substance in all of biblical law that can ritually purify a priest who has become ceremonially unclean. Without those ashes, no priest can serve at the altar. Without priestly service, no sacrifice can be offered. Without sacrifice, the temple is just a building. The red heifer is not an accessory to the temple. It is the key that makes the temple function. And for 1,956 years, that key has been missing, until a ranch in Texas changed everything. In 2022, 5 red heifers were born on a cattle ranch in the state of Texas. Each one raised under rabbinical supervision. Each one inspected regularly. Each one watched for the growth of a single disqualifying hair. The organization behind their care was called B'nai Israel. And in cooperation with the Temple Institute in Jerusalem, all 5 heifers were loaded onto a plane and flown across the Atlantic Ocean to the land of Israel. They were brought to Shiloh. That location matters, Because Shiloh is not just any place in Israel. Shiloh is where the tabernacle stood for 369 years before Solomon ever broke ground on the first temple. It is the same hills where the priests of ancient Israel served before Jerusalem was even a capital city. 5 red heifers. On the same ground where Israel's worship began, the world paid almost no attention. But rabbinical authorities in Israel were watching every single hair. By 2024, the heifers had reached the required minimum age of 2 years and were approaching the 3-year threshold. Inspections intensified. Rabbis examined each animal. And then came the complications. Several of the heifers were disqualified. A damaged tail on one. Non-red hairs detected on others. Defects that rendered them invalid under the strict requirements of Numbers 19. And at this point, most people following the story assumed it was over. But it was not over. Byron Stinson, the founder of Boneh Israel, the man who raised these animals in Texas and coordinated their entire transfer to Israel, made a statement that changed the conversation. At least one heifer remained qualified, and the disqualified animals were not discarded. They were moved into a breeding program. A supervised, rabbinically overseen breeding program on Israeli soil, specifically designed to produce the next generation of candidates. Stinson was direct about what that means. There were at least a dozen more animals in the pipeline. The search that produced 0 qualified animals for 1,956 years now is active, funded, supervised operations running on Israeli soil. And then came July 2025. A ceremony took place in the hills of Samaria that most of the world never heard about. A verified priest, a confirmed descendant of Aaron through DNA lineage testing, stood beside a red heifer on a wooden pyre. He was wearing the linen garments described in Exodus. Around him stood religious authorities, researchers, and cameras documenting the moment. He lit the fire. The heifer burned. The ashes were collected. For the first time since before the destruction of Jerusalem in 70 AD, a priest performed the red heifer ceremony on the soil of Israel. Now here is the detail that matters. The Temple Institute later clarified that this was a practice run, a rehearsal. The heifer used had a defect. The garments were not fully consecrated, and the location was wrong. Biblical law requires the ceremony to take place on the Mount of Olives, facing the Temple Mount directly. None of those final conditions were met. But here is what the rehearsal did accomplish. The Temple Institute released a statement confirming that the exercise improved their understanding of the process. It developed the priest's skill, and it identified specific weak points that needed to be addressed before the final ceremony. The process was tested. The logistics were confirmed. The ancient sequence was proven to be executable by modern priests using ancient methods on the land of Israel. And the ashes from that rehearsal were retained. So where does that leave things right now? One heifer remains qualified. A breeding program is actively producing candidates. A rehearsal has been completed. The weak points have been identified. And the final ceremony, the one that would produce valid ashes and unlock priestly service, is no longer theoretical. It is a matter of a qualified animal, the right location, and the right moment. 2,000 years of impossibility just became a logistics problem, and the people working on it are not slowing down. But the red heifer is only one piece. Because while these animals were being raised in Texas and inspected in Israel, something else was happening in Jerusalem that most people have never been told about. The furniture for the temple was already being built, and it has been ready for years. There is a building in the Jewish quarter of Jerusalem's Old City. Walk inside, and what is behind the glass cases will stop every person who understands what they are looking at. Because these are not museum exhibits. They are not historical reconstructions for tourists. They are not symbolic representations of something ancient and gone. They are functional sacred instruments built to exact biblical specifications from original source materials. Gold, copper, silver, wood, crafted for one purpose and one purpose only, used in the service of the Third Temple. The Temple Institute has stated this publicly and without ambiguity. These items are fit and ready for use in the service of the Holy Temple. Not fit for display, fit for use. There is a difference, and that difference is everything. Start with the most visible piece, the golden menorah, the 7-branch candelabra described in Exodus 25, made of pure gold, weighing approximately 100 pounds, valued at several $million. It sits in a glass case positioned so that it faces the Temple Mount directly, the very place it was built to stand. It is not pointed at a wall. It is not displayed toward the street. It faces the mount, like it is waiting for permission to cross. Next to it, the golden incense altar, built from wood and overlaid with pure gold, constructed to the exact dimensions prescribed in Exodus 30, for golden horns rising from its corners, a golden wreath running along its edges, representing the crown of the priesthood. Every measurement, every material, every decorative element, all sourced directly from the biblical text. Then the table of the showbread, gold overlaid, designed to hold the 12 loaves that Leviticus 24 describes being placed before God every Sabbath without fail. 3 central vessels, all complete, all functional, all waiting. But those 3 are just the beginning. The Temple Institute has not built 3 items. They have built over 60. Silver trumpets for public prayer, exactly as described in Numbers 10. Lyres and harps for the Levitical choir. Washing vessels, measurement tools, lottery boxes used in the selection of priestly duties, incense shovels, fire pans, flesh hooks. Every category of temple implement described in the Torah has been researched, sourced, and produced. And here is the detail that separates these vessels from every previous attempt in the last 2,000 years. Previous generations built replicas, symbolic pieces, items meant to represent what once existed. The Temple Institute built instruments. There is a word they use consistently in their public documentation. The word is authentic. Not replica, not model, not representation. Authentic, accurate, fit for use. The distinction matters because it changes what these objects are. A replica sits in a museum. An authentic vessel waits for a temple. But there is one more detail about the menorah that deserves specific attention. It is positioned in a glass case overlooking the western wall plaza, facing the Temple Mount, visible to anyone who stands at the wall and looks up to the right. Jewish law holds that the menorah must be lit in the temple. But in the absence of the temple, its placement facing the mount is deliberate, intentional, a statement made in stone and gold. We are not commemorating the past. We are preparing for what comes next. Every visitor who walks through that exhibition hall is walking through a functional warehouse. The items on display are not behind glass because they are fragile artifacts. They are behind glass because they are not yet needed. The moment they are needed, they can be removed, transported, and placed. Now consider what that means against the backdrop of history. When the Romans destroyed the Second Temple in 70 AD, they took everything. The menorah carried through the streets of Rome is carved into the Arch of Titus and visible in that city to this day. The vessels were scattered. The instruments were lost. For nearly 2,000 years, there was nothing to place inside a third temple, even if one could be built. That is no longer the case. The vessels exist. They are in Jerusalem. They face the mount they were built for. And if the building were completed tomorrow, the furniture could move in the same day. But vessels are only the furnishings. What about the clothing required for the people who would use them? Because the priestly garments are a story of their own. And one element of those garments involves a dye that vanished from human knowledge for 15 centuries. And what happened when researchers finally found it again should make every person paying attention take notice. For 15 centuries, a specific shade of blue did not exist. Not because people stopped wanting it. Not because the formula was kept secret. But because the creature that produced it disappeared from human knowledge entirely. The color is called Tekhelet. It is described in the Bible as a sky blue, a deep, specific hue that God commanded Moses to incorporate into the priestly garments in Exodus 28. It was woven into the high priest's ephod, into the breastplate, into the robe worn beneath the outer garments. And then, sometime around the 7th century, the knowledge of how to produce it was lost. The sea snail that generated the dye, a species called the Murex trunculus, was no longer being identified, harvested, or processed for that purpose. The ancient dyeing methods were forgotten. The specific chemical process that transforms the snail's secretion into that precise shade of blue was gone. For 1,500 years, the priestly garments could not be completed. One color, missing, and the garments could not be made without it. Then researchers began working off the coast of Israel. Through decades of marine biology, historical research, and dye chemistry, the Murex trunculus was identified, tested, and verified as the source of the biblical Tekhelet. The specific harvesting and processing methods were reconstructed through ancient texts and modern laboratory analysis. The dye was recovered from the Mediterranean Sea, a color that had been absent from human knowledge since before the Islamic caliphates, before the fall of Rome, before the rise of the medieval world, was back, and the Temple Institute used it. The high priest's garments require a level of construction that is difficult to fully communicate in words. Consider just the threading. Each string in the high priest's garments is composed of 28 individual threads. 6 of Tekhelet, 6 of argamon, a deep purple, 6 of crimson, 6 of white linen, and 4 threads of pure gold. 28 threads twisted together into a single string, multiplied across an entire garment. Over 600 meters of pure gold thread has been prepared for the high priest's breastplate alone. That is not decoration. That is precision. That is the difference between a garment that meets the biblical standard and one that does not. And for this audience, that difference is not minor. It is the difference between a ceremony that is valid and one that is not. The breastplate, called the Hoshen, holds 12 precious stones, each stone engraved with the name of one of the 12 tribes of Israel. The stones are set in gold settings across 4 rows of 3. The golden crown, called the tzitz, is inscribed with the words "Holy to the Lord" in ancient Hebrew script. It is designed to sit on the high priest's forehead during service. The ephod, the outer garment of the high priest, is complete. The robe beneath it, blue from hem to collar, is complete. The sash, the turban, the linen undergarments, all complete. And then there are the garments for the regular priests. White linen tunics, sashes, turbans, 4 garments each, all finished, not one piece missing. Every item required by Exodus 28 and 29 is accounted for. Now here is the detail that makes this more than a sewing project. These garments are not hanging in a costume department. They are not stored in a theatrical wardrobe. They are in Jerusalem, prepared, consecrated in their construction process, awaiting the priest who will wear them. And that raises the question that follows naturally. Because the garments exist, but who puts them on? Biblical law is specific. Only a verified descendant of Aaron, the brother of Moses, can serve as a priest, and only one man at a time can hold the office of high priest. The selection process for that man requires a functioning Sanhedrin, a governing religious court. It requires ritual purification, and it requires the ashes of the red heifer. 3 requirements, all of them connected to other preparations already underway. The garments are ready. The question of who wears them is being answered by a process that involves DNA testing, genealogical research, and a training program that has been running for years. Because the priests are not just identified, they are already in training, and what they have been learning to do has not been practiced by anyone on earth for over 2,000 years. 3,000 years is a long time to trace a bloodline. Most family trees fall apart after 4 or 5 generations. Records disappear, names change, borders shift, wars erase entire communities. And yet the priestly lineage of ancient Israel, the bloodline of Aaron, brother of Moses, designated by God in Numbers 3 for temple service, has been tracked, verified, and confirmed through modern genetic science. Here's how it works. The Y chromosome passes directly from father to son with minimal change across generations. It is the most stable genetic marker for tracing male lineage over long periods of time. And researchers at institutions including the Technion in Haifa, one of Israel's leading scientific universities, have identified specific Y chromosome markers that appear with high frequency in men who carry the surname Cohen. Cohen, Katz, Kahan, Kahane. These names in Jewish culture have always indicated priestly descent. They are not coincidental. They are the preserved memory of a lineage stretching back to the Exodus. But the genetic research goes deeper than surnames. The markers identified among men claiming Cohen descent are so consistent, appearing across Jewish communities separated by oceans and centuries, that researchers concluded the probability of a shared common ancestor in the priestly line is extraordinarily high. The bloodline was not lost. It was carried in the DNA of tens of thousands of men who never stopped passing it from father to son. From that pool, over 300 men with verified lineage are now enrolled in active training programs run by the Temple Institute and affiliated organizations. And the training is not ceremonial. It is not symbolic. It is operational. Every dimension of temple service is covered. Animal sacrifice procedures, how to select an offering, how to inspect it for disqualifying defects, the precise sequence of how it is slaughtered and prepared according to Levitical law, the the positioning, the movements, the prayers that accompany each stage, ritual purification protocols, the exact washing sequences required before a priest can approach the altar, the order of immersion, the timing, the specific conditions under which a priest is considered clean and ready to serve. Incense preparation. The temple incense formula contained 11 specific ingredients. This formula was historically guarded by a single priestly family, the House of Avtinas, who kept it secret for generations. The Temple Institute has researched and reconstructed that formula through rabbinical texts and historical sources. The priests in training are learning to prepare it. Altar service. The specific movements, positions, and vocal prayers that accompany every type of offering described in Leviticus. This is not a history class. This is a rehearsal. And then came the moment that took the training from theoretical to operational. During a recent Passover observance, the priests in training performed an authentic reenactment of the Korban Pesach, the Passover offering, using sacred vessels, wearing priestly garments, following the exact Torah sequence from selection of the animal to the completion of the offering. The first time in over 2,000 years that verified priests used consecrated vessels to rehearse the Passover sacrifice. Think about what that sentence means. The last time this was done with any level of authenticity, the temple was still standing. The city of Jerusalem was whole. The Romans had not yet arrived at the gates. And in a courtyard in modern Jerusalem, men in white linen garments walked through those same ancient steps. But here is where the training runs into its single greatest obstacle. Because trained priests are not automatically eligible for temple service, every priest, before approaching the altar, must be ritually pure. And ritual purity, according to Numbers 19, requires contact with the waters of purification, the water mixed with the ashes of the red heifer. Without those ashes, no priest, regardless of how verified his lineage is, regardless of how thorough his training has been, can serve at the altar. The training is complete. The bloodlines are confirmed. The garments are ready. But the final certification of every single one of these priests depends on one thing: the red heifer ceremony, not the rehearsal, the real one. And that ceremony requires a location, a qualified animal, and consecrated garments. 2 of those 3 conditions are being actively worked on right now. The third, the location, sits at the center of the most contested piece of real estate on the surface of the planet. More on that shortly. But before the location, before the politics, before the geopolitics of the Temple Mount itself, there are 3 more preparations that are already complete and waiting. The altar stones are assembled. The anointing oil is prepared, and a ceremony that has not taken place on Israeli soil since before the birth of Christ was rehearsed in the summer of 2025. And what happened on that hillside in Samaria is the kind of moment that only makes sense when you picture the Dead Sea, the lowest point on the surface of the earth, salt flats stretching to every horizon. Water is so dense with minerals that nothing lives in it, a landscape that looks like it belongs on another planet. In 2010, representatives from the Temple Institute came to this exact location. Not to swim, not to visit, not to photograph the scenery. They came to collect stones. And not just any stones. Stones that have never been touched by a metal tool. Because Deuteronomy 27 verse 5 is specific. An altar unto the Lord thy God shall be built of stones upon which no iron tool has been lifted. No chisel, no hammer, no saw, no blade of any kind. Every stone must be natural, formed by geological processes, shaped by wind and water and time, and collected by human hands without any metal instrument involved in their formation. The stones at the Dead Sea meet that requirement exactly, formed over millennia, untouched by human metalwork, collected by hand. Those stones were transported to Jerusalem, and from them, a transportable stone altar was constructed, assembled, tested, ready for placement on the Temple Mount the moment conditions allow. The altar is not a plan. It is not a blueprint. It is not a model. It exists. Now consider the anointing oil. Exodus 30 verses 22 to 25 gives the formula. Myrrh, cinnamon, calamus, cassia, olive oil, mixed in exact proportions prescribed by God to Moses on Sinai. This oil was used to consecrate the tabernacle, the Ark of the Covenant, the altar, the sacred vessels, and the priests themselves. Without it, a vessel is furniture. With it, the same vessel becomes a sacred instrument set apart for divine service. The formula was lost after 70 AD. The rare spices scattered across trade routes that collapsed over centuries. The knowledge of precise proportions fragmented across rabbinic texts that sometimes contradicted each other. For nearly 2,000 years, the oil did not exist. The Temple Institute recreated it. The spices were sourced globally, some from distant regions of Asia, others from Africa. The proportions were established through extensive rabbinical scholarship cross-referenced against every available ancient source. The oil has been prepared. It is stored in Jerusalem. It is ready to anoint the vessels, the altar, and the high priest when the temple exists to receive them. 2 more preparations checked. The altar assembled. The oil prepared. But it is the third preparation in this section that stands apart from all the others. July 1st, 2025. The hills of Samaria, Israel. The sun is low. The air is dry. A small group of people has gathered on a hillside that most of the world will never hear about. A priest stands in white linen garments. He is a verified Cohen, a confirmed descendant of Aaron through DNA lineage research. Beside him is a wooden pyre. On the pyre is a red heifer. The priest recites the required prayers. He lights the fire. The heifer burns. The ashes are collected. And for the first time since before 70 AD, a priest has performed the red heifer ceremony on the soil of Israel. 2,000 years of absence ended on a hillside that most news organizations did not even cover. Now here is the honest accounting of what that ceremony was and what it was not. The Temple Institute was clear in their public statements. This was a practice exercise, a rehearsal, not the final kosher ceremony. The heifer used had a defect, a damaged tail that disqualified it from producing valid ashes under biblical law. The priestly garments worn during the ceremony were not fully consecrated for this specific purpose, and the location was wrong. Biblical law requires the red heifer ceremony to take place on the Mount of Olives, facing the Temple Mount directly. The Samaria ceremony did not meet that geographic requirement. So the ashes produced that day are not valid for purification under Jewish law. That is the honest accounting. But here is what the Temple Institute said about what the rehearsal accomplished. It improved understanding of the process. It developed the Kohanim's skill in executing the ceremony. And it revealed specific weak points that needed to be addressed before the final ceremony could be performed correctly. One of those weak points was something as practical as the proper method of leading the heifer to its destination without distressing the animal in a way that could affect the ceremony. These are not theological problems. They are logistical ones. And logistical problems have logistical solutions. The process was tested. The sequence was validated. The ancient ritual was proven to be executable by modern priests on ancient land. And the ashes from the rehearsal were retained. Now step back and look at what that single day in Samaria represents in context. The last time a priest burned a red heifer anywhere on the soil of Israel, the Second Temple was still standing. Caesar ruled Rome. The apostles were still traveling the known world. The book of Revelation had not yet been written. And in July 2025, a priest in linen garments standing on that same soil, following the same commands recorded in Numbers 19, lit a fire that collapsed 2,000 years of absence into a single afternoon. The rehearsal is done. The weak points are identified. The final ceremony requires a qualified animal, consecrated garments, and the right location. One of those 3 involves the most politically explosive piece of ground on the planet. But before the politics, there is a building to discuss. Because while priests were training and rehearsals were being conducted, architects were finishing something else entirely. The blueprints for the temple itself are complete. The model is built, and the organization behind all of it says they can begin construction today. The only thing missing is a building permit. In 2025, a visitor center opened in Jerusalem. Inside it sits a scale model, 1:50. Every wall, every courtyard, every chamber, every entrance rendered in precise proportion. The model depicts a square structure, 150 meters long, 150 meters wide, heights varying across its different sections. A building that, if constructed on the Temple Mount, would be visible from virtually every point in the city of Jerusalem. This is not a concept sketch. It is not an artist's impression of what someone imagines the temple might look like. It is an architectural model based on detailed blueprints drawn to construction specification standards, the kind of plans you would submit to a municipal authority for a building permit. Behind the model are digital 3D renderings, full animations showing the temple from every angle. Ground level, aerial view, interior walkthrough, exterior approach. Every courtyard and inner sanctuary positioned and proportioned. Infrastructure plans exist alongside the architectural drawings. Road access routes, electrical systems, tram routes designed to handle the millions of pilgrims the temple would attract annually. This is not a religious fantasy. This is an engineering document. And the Temple Institute, the organization that has spent 36 years building toward this moment, made a statement about those plans that should stop every person watching this. If we want, we can build the third temple today. Today, not in a decade when political conditions improve, not when a messianic figure arrives to authorize construction, not when the international community reaches consensus. Today, the vessels are built and waiting. The garments are woven and stored. The altar stones are collected and assembled. The anointing oil is prepared. The priests are identified and trained. The ceremony has been rehearsed. The blueprints are drawn. The model is built. The Temple Institute is not speaking in aspirational terms. They are speaking in operational ones. The obstacle is not readiness. Every physical and human preparation required for a functioning temple is either complete or actively in progress. The obstacle is a building permit. Specifically, the permit to construct on the Temple Mount, a 37-acre platform in the Old City of Jerusalem that currently hosts two of the most significant Islamic structures in the world. But here is the architectural detail in the biblical text that most people have never considered. Because the assumption in most public conversation about the Third Temple is that its construction would require the removal of the Dome of the Rock or the Al-Aqsa Mosque. That assumption may be wrong. Revelation 11 verses 1-2 describes a future temple with a specific geographic distinction. John is told to measure the inner temple and the altar, but the outer court, he is told explicitly, is to be left out. Do not measure it. It is given to the Gentiles. Inner temple measured and accounted for. Outer court excluded and given to non-Jewish presence. Some architectural researchers and biblical scholars have proposed that the temple could be positioned on the Temple Mount in a location that does not require disturbing the existing Islamic structures. That the inner sanctuary, the holy place, and the Holy of Holies could be situated north of the Dome of the Rock rather than directly beneath it. This is debated heavily within both religious and academic communities. But the debate itself represents a shift. Because a generation ago, the conversation was whether a temple could ever exist. Now the conversation is about where exactly on the mount it would be positioned relative to existing structures. The question has moved from possibility to logistics. And the blueprints in Jerusalem reflect that shift. The plans are drawn. The model is built. The infrastructure is mapped. The organization behind it all has stated publicly that construction could begin today if permission were granted. What stands between the blueprint and the building is not engineering. It is not finance. It is not materials. It is not manpower. It is political permission to build on the most contested ground on earth. And that brings the conversation to a dimension that no previous generation of temple preparations ever had access to. Because for the first time in the 2,000-year gap, the political support for the Third Temple extends to the highest offices of the most powerful nation on the planet. And what is being said in those offices, publicly and on camera, has no precedent in all of modern history. Every previous attempt to rebuild the temple had one thing in common. It failed, not because the people behind it lacked faith, not because they lacked resources, but because the political conditions were never aligned with the physical preparations. And the physical preparations were never complete enough to matter even when the politics briefly allowed. The current moment is different on both counts, and the difference starts in Washington. In early 2025, Pete Hegseth was confirmed as the United States Secretary of Defense. The Secretary of Defense controls the most powerful military force in the history of human civilization. The same military currently operating in the Middle East. The same military enforcing strategic positions across the region. And Pete Hegseth has been publicly vocal, not privately, not in religious settings only, but publicly and on camera, about his support for the re-establishment of Jewish worship on the Temple Mount and his belief in the prophetic significance of the Third Temple. He has visited the Temple Institute in Jerusalem. He has met with advocates for temple construction. He has framed the issue not as a fringe religious position, but as a matter of historical justice and religious freedom. This is not a pastor with a congregation. This is not a commentator with a microphone. This is the man who commands the most powerful military on earth, serving a president who has described himself as the most pro-Israel president in American history. The combination of military power and theological conviction at this level of government has no precedent in the 1,956-year gap since the temple's destruction. And Hegseth is not operating in isolation. Reports have surfaced of direct communications between Israeli religious and civil leaders and President Trump regarding the question of Jewish worship rights on the Temple Mount. The specific content of those conversations has not been fully disclosed publicly. But the fact that the conversation is happening at that level, between the Israeli religious establishment and the American presidency, is itself without precedent in the modern era. No previous American administration maintained this level of direct engagement with the religious dimension of the Temple Mount question. Inside Israel, the political environment has shifted in ways that would have been unthinkable a decade ago. National Security Minister Itamar Ben-Gvir has visited the Temple Mount multiple times. Each visit deliberate, each visit covered by media, each visit a public assertion of Jewish sovereignty over the site. Members of religious parties sitting in Israel's governing coalition have publicly called not just for Jewish access to the Temple Mount, but for Jewish prayer rights on the Mount. The right to worship openly at the holiest site in Judaism, on the ground where Solomon built his temple, on the ground where Herod's temple stood until the Romans burned it in 70 AD. These are not fringe voices speaking from outside the government. These are coalition partners, people whose votes sustain the current Israeli government in power. The political conversation inside Israel has moved from whether Jews should be allowed to pray on the Temple Mount to when and how that right will be formally established. But perhaps the most significant political development is one that received almost no international coverage when it happened. In 2004, a group of rabbinical scholars took a step that had not been taken since approximately 425 AD. They reconvened the Sanhedrin. The Sanhedrin was the Jewish Supreme Court, the governing religious body that operated during the Temple era, the institution that oversaw temple operations, adjudicated religious law, approved the high priest, and held the authority to authorize the resumption of sacrifice. It was dissolved around 425 AD, more than 1,600 years ago. In 2004, 71 rabbinical scholars gathered in Tiberias, the same city where the original Sanhedrin held its final sessions before dissolution, and formally reconstituted the court. 71 members, consistent with the biblical model established in Numbers 11. The authority of this reconvened Sanhedrin is debated within the Jewish world. Not every rabbinical authority recognizes it, but its existence means something that has been absent for 16 centuries is now present again. The institutional framework for governing a functioning temple is no longer missing. The court exists. The judges sit. The legal body that would authorize construction, appoint the high priest, and regulate sacrifice has been operational for over 2 decades. Now consider what the convergence of these political factors means when placed alongside the physical preparations. Julian the Apostate in 363 AD had imperial political power. He had the Roman treasury. He had Jewish community support, but he had none of the physical preparations. No vessels, no garments, no trained priests, no red heifer, no anointing oil. Construction began and then stopped. Julian died months later. The attempt was over. The Crusaders controlled Jerusalem for 88 years. They had total military dominance of the Temple Mount, but they had none of the physical preparations either. No priests, no vessels, no garments, no red heifer. They occupied the mount for nearly a century and never attempted to build a Jewish temple. Israel in 1967 captured the Temple Mount in the Six-Day War. For the first time in nearly 2,000 years, Jewish forces controlled the site. But Defense Minister Moshe Dayan immediately handed administrative control to the Islamic Waqf. Why? Because in 1967, there were no vessels, no trained priests, no red heifer, no architectural plans, and no institutional framework for temple service. The political moment existed. The preparations did not. The current moment has both. Political support at the highest levels of American and Israeli government. A reconvened Sanhedrin. a temple institute that says it can build today, and physical preparations that are complete across 9 of the 10 required categories. No previous moment in the 2,000-year gap has had both the political environment and the physical preparations simultaneously, which brings everything to the question that this entire video has been building toward. What happens when all 10 preparations exist at the same time for the first time in history? What does that convergence mean? And what did the prophets say would follow it? History is full of moments that look like the threshold, moments when the pieces seemed to be aligning, when religious leaders said the time was near, when political conditions briefly opened a window that everyone assumed would lead somewhere. And every single one of those moments passed without the temple being built, not because the people lacked faith, not because God had abandoned the promise, but because the pieces were never all present at the same time. Never. Not once. In 1,956 years. Until now. Start with Julian the Apostate. The year is 363 AD. The Roman emperor who rejected Christianity and returned to paganism decides to rebuild the Jewish temple in Jerusalem. His motivations are complex, partly political, partly theological, partly as a direct challenge to the growing Christian movement that had prophesied the temple would never be rebuilt. Julian had things no one else had: imperial authority, the full weight of Roman governance behind the project, a treasury that could fund construction at scale, Jewish community support, workers who cleared the foundation and began the process. And then, according to multiple historical sources, including the Roman historian Ammianus Marcellinus, something interrupted the construction. The workers abandoned the site. Julian died in battle 3 months later. The attempt collapsed. What did Julian have? Political power, money, labor. What did Julian lack? Vessels, garments, trained priests, red heifer, anointing oil, architectural plans drawn to biblical specification, a Sanhedrin, and 300 years of preparation by any dedicated institution. He had one piece. He lacked 9. Move forward to 1099 AD. The Crusaders take Jerusalem. After centuries of Islamic control, Christian forces from Europe capture the city and hold it for 88 years. They control the Temple Mount for nearly a century. They convert the Al-Aqsa Mosque into a palace. They use the Dome of the Rock as a church. They have total physical dominance of the site. And they never attempt to build a Jewish temple, because they had one piece: territorial control, and 0 of the other 9. No Jewish priests, no sacred vessels, no priestly garments, no red heifer, no anointing oil, no architectural plans, no Sanhedrin, no training program, no institutional framework of any kind. One piece. 88 years. Nothing built. Now move to 1967, the Six-Day War. Israeli forces capture the Temple Mount on June 7th. Paratroopers reach the Western Wall. Rabbi Shlomo Goren blows the shofar at the wall. The commander radios back the most famous transmission in modern Israeli military history. The Temple Mount is in our hands. For the first time since 70 AD, Jewish forces control the site. And within days, Defense Minister Moshe Dayan hands administrative control back to the Islamic Waqf. In retrospect, understanding why requires only looking at what existed in 1967. No sacred vessels built to biblical specification. No priestly garments. No verified and trained priests. No red heifer program. No anointing oil. No architectural blueprints. No institutional framework for temple governance. Israel had the political and military moment. The preparations simply did not exist. One piece. And no path to the other 9. Now look at the current moment. And count. Sacred vessels. Over 60 items built to exact biblical specification from original source materials. Sitting in Jerusalem, declared fit for use. That is preparation 1. Priestly garments. Every item required by Exodus 28 and 29 completed, including a dye that was lost for 1,500 years and recovered from the Mediterranean Sea. Preparation 2. Altar stones. Collected from the Dead Sea without metal tools, assembled into a transportable altar. Preparation 3. Anointing oil. Recreated from the Exodus 30 formula. Stored in Jerusalem. Preparation 4. Priests identified and trained. Over 300 DNA-verified descendants of Aaron in active training programs covering every dimension of temple service. Preparation 5. Red heifer program. 5 heifers imported from Texas to Israel. a breeding program producing new candidates on Israeli soil. At least one animal currently qualified. Preparation 6. Red Heifer Ceremony rehearsed. Performed for the first time in over 2,000 years on Israeli soil in July 2025. Preparation 7. Architectural plans and scale model. Blueprints drawn to construction specification. 3D renderings completed. Infrastructure planned. A 150 scale model on public display in Jerusalem since 2025. Preparation 8. Political support. A U.S. Secretary of Defense who publicly advocates for temple reconstruction. An Israeli governing coalition with members calling for Jewish prayer rights on the Mount. Direct communications between Israeli religious leaders and the American presidency. Preparation 9. The Sanhedrin reconvened. The institutional religious court that would govern temple operations has been operational since 2004. Preparation 10. 10 preparations. All 10. Simultaneously. For the first time in 1,956 years. Now consider what that means against the backdrop of every previous attempt. Julian had one piece. The Crusaders had one piece. Israel in 1967 had one piece. The current moment has all 10, and not as theoretical concepts, not as aspirational goals, as physical, documented, verifiable realities sitting in Jerusalem right now. The vessels can be touched. The garments can be worn. The altar can be transported. The oil can be poured. The priest can be called. The plans can be submitted. The court can convene. Every previous generation looked at the temple's rebuilding as something that would require a miracle to even begin. The current generation has completed the preparations and is waiting for a building permit. But here is what makes the convergence more than a logistical milestone. Because 4 voices spoke about this moment before it arrived. 4 writers, separated by centuries, each describing the same future temple with specific details that connect directly to the preparations now assembled in Jerusalem. And what they described is not a symbol, not a metaphor, not a spiritual concept dressed in architectural language. They described a building, with dimensions, with an altar, with priests, with sacrifice, with a specific sequence of events that follows its construction. A sequence that the world is now one building permit away from being positioned to begin. What those 4 voices said, and what it means that everything they described is now assembled and waiting. That is what comes next. 4 voices, separated by centuries, writing in different languages, living in different empires, never meeting each other, and every one of them described the same building, not symbolically, not poetically, with dimensions, with function, with a specific sequence of events attached to its existence. Start with the oldest. Daniel wrote in the 6th century BC. He was a Jewish exile in Babylon, serving in the court of Nebuchadnezzar, the king who had destroyed Solomon's temple and carried the Jewish people into captivity. And from that exile, Daniel described a future event with a precision that should make every person watching this pay very close attention. Daniel 9 verse 27. And he shall confirm the covenant with many for 1 week. And in the midst of the week, he shall cause the sacrifice and the oblation to cease. Read that carefully. He shall cause the sacrifice to cease. You cannot stop something that is not happening. For sacrifice to be stopped, it must first be started. For it to be started, a temple must exist. For the temple to exist, vessels must be built, priests must be purified, altars must be assembled, and anointing oil must be prepared. Daniel described the stopping of temple sacrifice 2,600 years ago. Every preparation currently assembled in Jerusalem is a precondition for the event Daniel described. The covenant begins a 7-year period. The abomination of desolation occurs at its midpoint, inside the temple. Both events require a functioning temple. 9 of the 10 preparations required for that temple are complete. Now move forward 600 years to a hillside outside Jerusalem. Jesus is sitting with his disciples on the Mount of Olives. They are looking at Herod's temple across the valley, marble and gold catching the afternoon light, one of the most magnificent structures in the ancient world. And Jesus tells them it is going to be destroyed, not one stone left upon another. The disciples are stunned. They ask when, and what sign will precede it. Jesus answers them in Matthew 24. And within that answer is a specific reference to Daniel's prophecy. A reference that changes everything about how the current preparations should be understood. Matthew 24 verse 15. When ye therefore shall see the abomination of desolation, spoken of by Daniel the prophet, stand in the holy place. Whoso readeth, let him understand. The holy place, the inner sanctuary of the temple. Jesus is looking at the temple that was still standing when he said those words. And he is describing an abomination that would occur in the holy place of a future temple. A temple that would exist after the one he was looking at was destroyed. He was not speaking to the generation sitting with him on that hillside. He was speaking to the generation that would see it happen. Whoso readeth, let him understand. A direct instruction, not a suggestion, not a theological invitation, a command to pay attention. Paul writes his second letter to the Thessalonians sometime around 50 AD. The temple is still standing. Jerusalem is still intact. But Paul is writing to a community that is confused about the timing of the return of Christ. Some believe it has already happened. Paul corrects them. 2 Thessalonians 2 verses 3-4. Let no man deceive you by any means. For that day shall not come except there come a falling away first, and that man of sin be revealed, the son of perdition, who opposeth and exalteth himself above all that is called God or that is worshipped, so that he as God sitteth in the temple of God, showing himself that he is God. Sitteth in the temple of God. A physical act. In a physical building. Paul is not describing a spiritual infiltration. He is not using temple as a metaphor for the church or for the human heart. He is describing a man entering a specific building and performing a specific act of self-declaration. He as God sitteth in the temple of God. That act cannot occur in a building that does not exist. The return of Christ, according to Paul, is preceded by this event. This event requires a temple. The temple requires the preparations. The preparations are assembled. Now John, writing from exile on the island of Patmos, sometime near the end of the 1st century, the temple in Jerusalem has been destroyed for roughly 25 years. And an angel hands John a measuring rod. Revelation 11 verses 1-2. Rise and measure the temple of God and the altar and them that worship therein. But the court which is without the temple leave out, and measure it not. For it is given unto the Gentiles. And the holy city shall they tread under foot 42 months. John is not told to imagine a temple. He is told to measure one. With a physical instrument. In specific dimensions. 3 things to measure. The temple itself. The altar. The worshippers. The temple corresponds directly to preparation 8. The architectural plans that have been drawn, modeled, and displayed in Jerusalem since 2025. The altar corresponds to preparation 3. The stones collected from the Dead Sea and assembled into a transportable altar ready for placement. The worshippers correspond to preparation 5. The over 300 priests identified, verified, and trained for service. Each element John is commanded to measure is a preparation that currently exists. But the detail that most people miss in this passage is the outer court. John is told not to measure it. It is given to the Gentiles, non-Jewish presence, for 42 months. 42 months, 3.5 years, the exact duration of the second half of Daniel's 7-year covenant period. The timelines of Daniel and John are identical. The temple exists during Daniel's 7-year period. The outer court is under Gentile control for the final 42 months. And here is what that outer court detail reveals about the current situation on the Temple Mount. The Dome of the Rock and Al-Aqsa Mosque have occupied the Temple Mount for over 1,300 years. The Islamic Waqf administers the site. Jewish prayer is officially restricted on the ground that is the holiest site in Judaism. Every conventional analysis of the Third Temple assumes that construction cannot begin until those structures are removed or relocated, that the Islamic presence on the Mount is the insurmountable obstacle. But John's vision describes a temple that coexists with Gentile presence in the outer court. The inner sanctuary is Jewish. The outer court remains under non-Jewish control. The obstacle that appears impossible to resolve may already be described, accounted for, and resolved in the text that was written 2,000 years ago. For witnesses, for books, for descriptions of the same temple. Daniel wrote about the stopping of sacrifice. Jesus pointed to the abomination in the holy place. Paul described the man of sin sitting in the temple. John was handed a measuring rod and told to quantify it. All 4 require the same building. All 4 describe events that cannot occur without the preparations now assembled in Jerusalem. And here is the question that none of the preparations, none of the political support, None of the architectural plans and none of the 4 witnesses can fully answer. The red heifer, one qualified animal, a breeding program on Israeli soil, a rehearsal completed, weak points identified, the final ceremony requiring the Mount of Olives, consecrated garments, and a kosher animal. The Temple Institute has said they can build today. The priests are trained and waiting. The vessels are behind glass, facing the mount. The plans are drawn. The court is convened. And somewhere in the hills of Israel, a red heifer is being watched. Every hair, every day, because when that animal passes its final inspection and the ceremony moves from the rehearsal in Samaria to the Mount of Olives facing the Temple Mount directly, the last preparation will be complete. And what follows the completion of the last preparation is not a building project. It is the beginning of a sequence that Daniel described 2,600 years ago, that Jesus told his disciples to watch for, that Paul said must precede the return of Christ, that John was handed a measuring rod to document. The question is no longer whether the preparations are real. They are real. Every one of them is documented, funded, and operational. The question is what happens the morning after the final ceremony is complete. And that answer is already written. It has been written for 2,600 years.